everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing live show number 371. And yes, your eyes do not deceive you. We have the one, the only, Mr. Tim Peter. We also have Mr. Ed apparently in the wings. I don't know. I have this intrinsic joy of keeping Ed baited in the corner. I don't know.
I want to point out I have nothing to do with this. This is your show, Lauren. And
Ed, for the record, I kept saying to Tim, we should let Ed in. He's like, no.
Nobody puts Ed in the corner.
Nobody puts baby in a corner. Mr. Tim, thank you. It has been a long time coming that I've been just like, hey, I just wanted to have a show where I get to listen to the wisdom of Mr. Peter. And
wisdom is a fancy word for horse. Who?
No. This was deep, insightful, perspective stuff. But no, you actually you brought up the subject that has been bouncing this entire time on the show for the past couple months anyway, because we are in the notorious budget season. So you brought up the topic about budgets for 2023 and the things you have with it. And for that reason, it's like, great. Love for you to lead with it. I will say, if Ed loves some Tim Peter storylines, yeah, okay. All right. Ed's playing nice. I'm going to bring him in, but Ed, Tim, it's Tim's show.
It is not Tim's show. It is.
Right. Hold on.
I think of myself as the first guest of the evening. That's
okay. Okay, Johnny. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly.
But see, Ed is like Robin Williams on the Tonight Show. There he is.
There he is.
Robin Williams, eh?
There he is.
Ed, dude, if your ears were burnt, I was telling Tim the whole thing. It's like, see, if I let Ed in, we're gonna go left, we're gonna go right. I really just want.
I can be good. I can stay on. But that being said, I am going to start by completely distracting from all of this. And Tim would agree. There's a far more important thing to start with.
There is a far more important thing.
What do we?
Ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday
to you,
Lauren. Happy birthday to Lauren. Happy birthday, Lauren.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Mr. President. As I look all sultry and
it was compelling.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. I was actually telling Tim previous to the shows that it's funny. I never was much for birthdays, but the past few years, it's actually been like, you know what? It's fun to celebrate the fact that you got another one coming around.
No, I know, and you don't look a day over 80.
Thank you. I don't feel like a day over 90, so I'm pretty good there.
Did you want to start with talking about when you saw the Queen start her rule and
well, no, we'd have to
what
go
that
back
meant
to
to you?
what
that meant to you as a 15-year-old at the time?
No, we have to go back to Queen Vic. I mean, if Robert was here, we'd go back to when Richard the Lionhearted first pulled his sword out of the stone.
Right, Canute the Great.
And he'd be, talking about Merlin and stuff. Answer me these questions.
I do want to say, watery tarts distributing swords is no basis for a government.
How do you know he's the king? He doesn't have grip all over him. Yes, we can quote Monty Python all day.
Yes, we can.
Not if we want to keep an audience.
That's
true too.
Back to the topic at hand. Budgets 2023. Yes. And I'm all ears on this because I've been ranting about this for the past few shows. So I'm all good about the Tim Peter perspective. And now
and my perspective is less about budget and more about how you think about budget, more about how you manage your budget, right? There's a quote I've been using a lot from a guy named Jason Furman, who's a Harvard economist. He served in the Obama administration. He was the Council of Economic Advisors, who said, if you're not a little confused about the economy, you're not paying attention. We are seeing historically large disconnects. These are all things he said. These are 3 different sets of stats that have never moved in opposite directions before. None of them, let alone all of them at the same time. So jobs are growing, but GDP is contracting. Price growth is rising, but wage growth is falling. And consumer sentiment is plummeting. But as everybody in the hotel industry knows right now, consumer spending is actually going up like crazy. Like, people are booking all over the place. Not any one of those pairs has ever moved in those directions at the same time before, let alone all three. So we are in a historically weird economy. So really my perspective on this, if I have one, is that we have to be really smart, we have to be really flexible, we have to be really agile, we have to really think about the budgeting process and how we use budget more creatively and be more sensible in terms of thinking about where we're going to invest our money, how many long-term commitments we're going to make, where it makes sense to make long-term commitments versus being a little more flexible, a little more tactical, a little more opportunistic. So I mean, that's the biggest picture thing I can say. The second big picture thing I would say is that right now, we've been trying for years, hotels have been trying for years to shift share from the OTAs. And right now, everybody loves the OTAs. All the hotels are playing nice with the OTAs. Everybody's, kumbaya and gathered around the campfire, and everybody's, having a great time. It is also, and I think one of the reasons for that is because it is also as cheap as it will ever get as a share of revenue to drive direct business. So, if you don't want to be, having a contentious relationship with the OTAs when times get tough again, now is actually the time to say, okay, how do we have a more direct relationship with our customers? How do we have more direct business? Because it's not going to get any cheaper as a share of revenue than it is right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the last big trend that I would point to before we, I'll shut up and then, I'd love to have a dialogue about this for sure, is that business travel is still seriously depressed and doesn't look like it's coming back in any meaningful way from the depressed level that it is. If we look at TSA traveler throughput, we're running somewhere between 10 and 15% below 2019 numbers. And we know that leisure travel is way up. So we have to assume that business travel is probably down 20, 30% from historical averages. I talk to you guys know this. People who've seen the show before might know this, or seen me on the show before might know this. I do work with the Conference Board. The Conference Board is an economic advisory firm. They do economic research, and we have councils with lots of Fortune 500 companies, lots of Global 500 companies outside the travel industry. And while I can't speak to what I've been told by any individual company, I can say general consensus is their travel budgets are tight. They're not budgeting as much money for travel as they used to, because they have found generally they can be every bit as effective as they ever were with seriously reduced business travel. So, it's not just that people are worried about the pandemic. It's that companies have looked at this and said, we don't need to put as many people on the road as we once did. We don't need to have, people on the road 4 nights a week or 3 nights a week or 5 nights a week as we once did, to the level that we once did. Mm-hmm. I'm not like, I don't want to be doom and gloom and be like, business travel is dead and it's never coming back. I just mean that it's lower than it was, and that's probably the new normal level, at least for the next year or two. So we've got, weird economy, we've got business travel is low, and we've got that it's cheap to acquire direct guests, and that you may want to use that to shape how you think about your budget as we go into 2023, right? And at that point, I'll shut up and, I have questions for y'all, and I'm sure you might have some questions too.
So I just want to make sure, because I'm trying to hear this through property level managers' lens. So you're saying what I should do is just add a percentage above what I did this past year.
Yeah. And then once it's printed,
absolutely.
Okay. I mean, I just
do
want
everything
sure
you've ever done and do 5% more. Yeah,
right.
I
just wanted to make sure I understood.
And put the date in pencil so you don't have to go through the extra work of reprinting a date for 2024.
When I look at though, like the things you're talking about, I mean, what that really means is you actually have to build either multiple forecasts and spending models off forecast, or you need to adopt a tethered kind of performance threshold, unlocking spend level, kind of way of thinking.
Well, and I would suggest you need to do both. right?
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in you should scenario plan a little bit. And when I say scenario plan, I mean there's people who are paid scenario planners. Like, this is a complicated discipline, and I don't want to diminish it. But you can certainly say, okay, here is what we think is the best case scenario. Here's what we think is the worst case scenario, and here's what we think is the most likely scenario, just based on your own experience, what you've seen over the last year, what you've seen over the last 2 years, and work from that. And then give yourself, in old school project management, there's this idea of what's called a stage gate process. You don't see this as much any longer, or outside of very, very large projects, you don't see it as much. But, in a stage gate process, you define certain stages and you have gate points. And those gate points are places where you say, yep, we want to continue to move forward, we want to stop altogether, or we want to adapt.
Right.
And so you can lay out your scenarios and lay out various stages that say, if we have X, amount of business on the books at a certain point, we're forecasting 30 days out, we're forecasting 45 days out, we're forecasting 90 days out. Those are your stages, at which point you say, are we moving towards the best case scenario? Are we veering towards the worst case scenario? Or are we on pace for where we thought? And that's your gate point to say, great, we're where we thought we'd be, keep doing what we're doing. Oh, we're below, now we make a different decision. Oh, we're above, now we make a different decision, right?
Yeah.
So it's really a little bit of both.
And talking to that, you got a taste of that this summer. This summer had some weird demand and traveler behavior that felt a little panicky at times. Like you could look at what was happening. I mean, 4th of July was a weird time.
Super weird.
And
depending
so
on the
many
market you're in.
destinations.
But
in so many destinations,
Yeah.
it wasn't what was expected. But then strangely, the week after had incredible demand.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So there, and so what that tells you is there are so many unusual things at play that you can't accurately pinpoint what consumers are going to do
That's
now.
right.
So what was at play for 4th of July? That was almost the peak of the gas cost. But that was also really the peak of consumers aware that flying was a nightmare.
Right.
And leading up to that, the week after wasn't looking strong leading up to the week before 4th of July, but then the week after ended up being fairly strong, stronger than the week of 4th of July for a lot of markets. And I think what that tells us is we need to constantly be taking in what are the things happening, what do we think that's doing behaviorally, and understand that it's always been true that every situation is temporary. But we really need to accept that right now and not knee jerk as we go through things.
That's right.
And then you made a great point that I don't know if it was given enough air to really hit with people. When you're in really good times, this is the time to negotiate the really tough contracts to traditionally negotiate. If you wait till that goes the other way, you will not be happy with where you end up.
That's exactly right. I'll start there. I wanted to add one more thing to what you said prior, but I'll start there. Yeah, I mean, this is an enormous opportunity that you have. When you're looking at the cash flow that a lot of properties are seeing, when you're looking at the rates that a lot of properties are able to charge right now and things along those lines, this is your rainy day fund, right? This is the thing that sets you.
Uh-oh. Tim, you not only we lost your audio, you also disappeared for a moment.
And then came back. Yeah.
That was very strange.
Your microphone's different.
Your earbuds died.
That's very weird.
I'm hearing you off your computer microphone.
I think off your computer microphone.
Hold on 1 second. Let me try something real quick if I can do this.
Yeah, your microphone changed for us.
Hold on 1 second.
AirPods, man, they're unreliable.
Yeah, I think the big mic lost, or
Yeah.
Hold on.
Tim's always having trouble with Big Mike.
Oh, well,
I am not going to touch that with a 10-foot.
He said pole.
Yeah, he did. He said 10-foot pole.
He said 10-foot pole.
Don't know. I apologize. I don't know the
No, you're fine. Technology is great when it works. Gosh knows. I mean, that is the bane of any of the video, is like when all of a sudden the audio or video sources say, no, we're not going to work anymore.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I can see how to mute myself. I can see the details of me, but I can't see how to change my...
It's a source audio that I think it changed, but I will add to one thing that you guys are mentioning, and I'm sure he's going to reset, is I found that there's a paradox between people that are now in the role of budgeting versus... How's it sound now? Let's see. Go ahead, Tim.
Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes, you are back.
Yeah, you're back.
Okay,
you're back.
cool. All right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I don't know what happened there. That's really weird.
Uh,
Sorry,
I-
you were saying. I didn't mean to.
I was just going to... I've noticed that there's a bit of a paradox in the current budget season as well, to make it even more complex, is there's people that are in the role for the budgeting process that they're very new to the role. And
Well,
then-
I mean, and I'm so sorry for cutting you off.
No, you're fine.
Going back to Jason Furman, the economist I mentioned, he shared a chart. I would pull it up if I thought I could find it quickly. I know it's in a Twitter like, and I haven't moved it to my normal place, and it's probably 8,000 Twitter likes deep by this point in the week. But the hospitality industry has lost 1.1 million workers during the pandemic. Right? It's an interesting chart because it's a curve of, here are the various industries that have lost workers, and here are the industries that have gained workers. And if you look at unemployment is actually very, very, very low. There are about 1 million people who used to work in the hospitality industry who now work somewhere else. So one of the reasons you got people who are new to this, one of the reasons you have people who are, learning how to do this for the first time, is we have a whole bunch of new blood and a whole bunch of people who aren't working in the field any longer, right?
Yeah.
And that exacerbates the fact that the only thing that they have as reference point, first off, there's very little training associated with this discipline when it comes to budgets. Honestly, I've never but one place seen any sort of guidance that was a learning component to how does a sales department, this is the only example I ever had in person, sales department do budgeting. That's the only, and there was an old version. It was years ago. So I don't know how up to date most places are about making sure that the people that are responsible for it are aware of what they have to calculate. But even if that be the case, the old examples are not applicable examples.
Right.
So even if they have the traditional passing of the guard, here's your epaulets and sword, it doesn't mean that they know what the hell they're doing. I'm trying to go all the, royal stuff at this point.
Well, I tell you what though, I'm gonna say we should use that as an opportunity, and the reason we should use it as an opportunity, and I want to build on both things you said there, is we are in a different state now, right? Things are less predictable, so we used to do things a certain way. Maybe it's an okay time to say, we're not going to do them the same we did, and it's okay that you don't know the way we used to do them, because the way we need to do them going forward needs to change anyway. So that can be an opportunity rather than a negative necessarily. You still have to do the work. You still have to help those people get the support that they need. You still have to help people come up with the right answers to the question. But I would suggest we want to use this as an opportunity as opposed to just, this is terrible. The thing that I wanted to say a moment ago, I'm going to digress for a second and tell a quick story. But it's to set
I find that shocking that you would do that.
Totally out of character.
So years and years ago, when I first joined a leisure hotel company, we made, as many companies that focus primarily on leisure do, we made a healthy chunk of our revenue between Memorial Day and Labor Day. And I joined the company right before Memorial Day, and there were people on the team running around like crazy people trying to get the summer promotion launched, right? We have to get the content, and we have to get the web pages updated, and we have to get the email dropped, and we have to get, the print materials, and we have to deadlines, we have to meet for print ads, and yada, yada. And people are running around just a couple of, 2 weeks ahead of Memorial Day, still trying to nail down details and things like that, right? All right, well, fast forward a year, and the exact same scenario is playing out. And after we got past Memorial Day, we held a team meeting to kind of talk about what had happened. And somebody asked, how is it possible that we got surprised by summer twice? Right? We're pretty sure it happens at the same time every year. It shouldn't come as a shock to us. Right? The reason I'm telling this story is, I want to go back to what Ed said a moment ago about, July was nuts. July 4th weekend was nuts. The week leading up to it was different than we expected. The week after it was different than what we expected. And align that with what I was saying about thinking about a new way of doing budgeting and thinking about, our stage gate and being, scenario planning and thinking about it that way. We shouldn't be surprised by the abnormal by this point. Right? So if we're saying we're going to do a normal budget process, we're going to do things that we did last year and the year before and the year before that and the year before that, ad infinitum, but we know that the world is really strange, maybe we should not be surprised by it, but take it for granted that the world is strange and say our process is going to adapt to the realities of the world we live in. Not don't have a process, not don't plant a stake in the ground and say that this is what we're going to move towards, not say we're not going to allocate certain amounts of budget to certain things, but instead allow for flexibility in it so it's not always a crisis scenario when things aren't where we thought they would be, whether that's positive or negative. Right? Don't let summer surprise you. If we know it's going to start on Memorial Day, maybe we should be planning for that before, Memorial Day.
Actually, depending on your destination, do you know when you should start planning for summer? In September.
Sure. Oh, yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Because that's actually when a lot of shopping happens. Like a lot of early dreaming shopping happens is September.
We tend to use from a content calendaring perspective and partly from a budgeting perspective, obviously this has an influence on this, but we tend to use a rocks, pebbles, sand approach, right?
Yeah.
You're all familiar with this, right? Where you got a jar and you got to fill it with rocks and pebbles and sand. Well, if you put all the sand in first, there's no room for the rocks and pebbles.
Right.
So you start with the rocks, right? You start with what are the big things we care about? Anytime you do scenario planning, one of the things you start with are what are the known knowns, right? We know when July 4th is going to be. We know when Memorial Day is going to be. If you're a ski resort, we know when, essentially when the first snowfall is going to hit, right? We know when spring break is. We know when, right? So you line up those rocks and you say, great, we need to make sure we're thinking about those from a planning perspective.
Right.
And then the pebbles are things that are closer in. What are we doing for the next 90 days?
Right.
And then sand can be the stuff that, that's the opportunistic thing. That's the unexpected events. That's
Let's be honest, in our industry, it just blows on you.
Well,
whatever sticks to you is what you got.
Right. No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. But start with the known knowns, right? Start with the things that you expect to be, constant.
Right.
Then the next thing you start with is the known, and I don't want to call them the known unknowns. There's a different term, and I'm blanking on it right at the moment. But you start with the things where you know what's going to happen. You know what the event. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. The historical thing is there's going to be an election in November, right? We don't know who's going to win the election, but we know there's going to be an election, right? So you can plan for those things as well. Bringing it back to our industry. We know that spring break is in a certain period, but we don't know where a guest's going to come from. Are they going to fly or are they going to drive, right? We know that, Labor Day weekend, Memorial Day weekend, et cetera, there's those things coming up. We don't know, are we going to get most of our business from drive or fly market?
I want to take something that you said and expand on a little bit of where you said that,
please.
The idea of this is taking the opportunity now to be different about how we approach budgets. Unfortunately, to your point, I see more similarities to what people's processes are this year as they were last year, as they were the year before. And very little has changed other than the uncertainty principle of what they're actually trying to construct. I still see it as kind of a process, again, with the royalty analogy. The leadership comes out with, this is what you must do, and they hand the format out. And it's received and then brought back. And then it's a matter of getting the task off their table to shove to the next person, whatever is being done. with not a real understanding of how it works together. Like, okay, if this number is here, then I can budget my department here because that moved the number to where I can now spend the money to what I'm going to budget it for, and I can put my wish list in or all the other stuff. But they don't understand the correlations. And
Right.
so for them, they're waiting for the person in line in front of them to do what they need to do so that they can do what their part of the chain is, but not an understanding of the process. It's when this needle goes up, pull the lever, not knowing what that's for, just knowing they have to do it. And I think this is a huge chance for people to be, because I get a lot of questions because I try to be approachable with clients where
No,
I know.
No, stop.
I like talking.
Yeah.
I like talking. What the hell's up?
never
but
heard that
what happened is
before
they'll
about
get handed
you.
a budget. Yeah, they'll get handed a budget, and all of a sudden I get a call. It's like, Lauren, how do you calculate this ratio? Because they don't ask up; they ask out.
Yeah.
And so what they get stuck, they get stuck on. I want to do this right, but I don't understand what I'm doing to know whether it's right. And so that the education process, the ability to change the direction, is a very viable one right now. While we're a little late in the season to have that happen, we're kind of in the middle of when it does happen. September is the month of take the data, make it numbers thing. So we're kind of in the middle of the process right now.
And I would add two things to that. One, even if we're a little late in the process, and I recognize, we're in mid-September at this point, it's still not a bad time to say, you know what, we have more than one scenario here, and we need to be thinking about this from that perspective.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is just like Ed said, now's the time to have your difficult negotiations. Sometimes that difficult negotiations with your asset manager, right? Sometimes that difficult negotiation is with the ownership group.
That was the funny thing I was going to talk about next is, try to get out of the way. What has to be. Right. And so why I say that is sometimes the what has to be, actually I say sometimes, often I hear the what has to be is we have to show this much revenue, this much profit.
Yes. Yeah.
Which actually, I know sounds problematic. It's actually kind of freeing because you're actually nailing down two things that you can then start crafting to how do we hit those.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
But often, unfortunately, from what I've seen, is that it has to be this comes after the review of it's done.
Yeah.
So now's the time, like you said, to kind of open up those conversations and say, what has to be
right. That's right.
And let us figure that out.
Figure out how. Right.
Yeah.
I left a job years ago because fundamentally, I disagreed with the person I worked for. We got along really well and things along those lines. But, my perspective was you can tell me what you need or you can tell me how to get there. But if you try to tell me both, there's no purpose for my being here, particularly if I don't agree with one and or both of those. Right. But it is one of those things where, I agree with you completely, Ed, that the idea of having the right target up front makes all the difference in the world because, it's okay to have a target. It's okay to have a ridiculous target, right? Because it helps the company plan for here's the things we want to be able to do. We want to be able to invest in capital improvement. We want to be able to invest in hiring more people or rethinking the way we staff because staffing has become such a problem or doing X or Y or Z. Right. Or having more money in the bank for when guests stop traveling, which we know is going to happen one of these days because we're on an upswing right now. Right. So it's okay to have those goals. Yeah. But you need to have them now so that when you're planning towards, okay, how do we get to a 30% left or whatever the number is going to be?
Right.
Well, I think also in the modalities of how they get handled now, we actually poison our own well with how do we approach budgeting. Ownership has their perspective of what their anticipation of this is. So unabashedly, they're guiding what they're asking when they're handing it over. Like, we are going to have a growth this next year for us to be able to do X, Y, Z. That predication means that whoever that's being handed to, the management team or something to dissimulate, their goal is to hit the objective that they were told we need to increase our revenues or we need to increase whatever. And then that's translated down to them, but nothing's being explained to know how they can approach it. They're not going back up with questions of how to do it. They're looking for ways of just shoveling down with the process.
Yeah, well, and this comes into something I say all the time, which is one of the biggest challenges I see inside of most of the lodging industry is a lack of understanding of your identity of your business. Why is your business existing? And so this you're really starting to wade into that weak point, which is, listen, owners can say anything they want, but if the vision of what are we isn't clear, then yeah, you're never going to be able to understand how to do this, right? Or why.
Yeah, I mean, it's I've said this when we've had these conversations before, so I'm repeating myself to you, but you, for folks who might be listening to the show, we're with me on it anyway for the first time in a while. It's, are you in the hospitality business or you're in the real estate business, right? Either are valid, by the way, and I'm
Right,
not
but you
making
need
a
to know
value
it.
statement, but you really need to know it. When I worked at Wyndham and I left Wyndham 14 years ago, so I want to be very clear. It may be a different reality today, 15 years ago, maybe a different reality today. But for a good chunk of the time I worked there, for the first 5 years I worked there, we weren't a hotel company. And I don't mean that in a negative way. We were a franchise sales company, right? The purpose of the business was to sell franchises, period.
Yeah.
The people who owned the franchise, the people who owned the properties, were in the hotel business.
Right.
Our job was to give them a flag to hang outside and tools and support them and standards and things along those lines. I don't want to diminish any of the folks on the operations side, but our business was built on selling franchises, not even on putting heads in beds or things along those lines, let alone taking care of those heads once they were there. That was the franchisee's job. Our job was to sell franchises, and knowing that internally made us much more successful than if we were like having conflicts about, wait a second, but we're hoteliers. Not at that time.
And what it gives you is it gives you that point of clarity of when there's something that is coming up that you need to get into. If you know what your purpose is, you know how far you need to go on each of those things. So if your purpose is to sell franchise, then that actually gives you that guiding North Star of, in anything we get into, we are doing it to help enable our ability to sell more franchise. So, and that's not a bad thing, because that also means you made a comment of it's the franchisee's responsibility to deliver the experience, but it's also partly your responsibility to make sure they do that to the level that allows you to continue selling franchises, right?
To define what the experience is, to make sure that people hold to that standard. I mean, we had a terrific one of the last CEOs I worked for there. I worked for two, but the second CEO I worked for there really put an enormous emphasis on quality of the franchise itself, because we did discover, if somebody, this might surprise you, and again, this research is years out of date. I'm sure the basic concept still holds true, but I wouldn't plant a flag on it today by any stretch. We found that a guest who stayed in and had a bad experience with a hotel once in the system, it didn't really sour their experience of the brand generally. They were savvy enough to know, well, there's 1,000 of these, you're going to hit a bad one every now and again. But if they had it repeatedly 2 or 3 times, then they said the brand was bad.
Yeah.
And so we had, a big quality initiative to say, okay, anybody who can't maintain at least a certain standard, we're going to do the legal minimum that we have to under UFOCs and things like that to give them a chance to remediate. But we're not going to give them forever to remediate. We're going to get them out of the system, because they're hurting all the other franchisees and hurting our ability to bring in more franchisees, right? Why would I want flag X if I know that, 20% of the system is terrible?
Right.
I will say one positive thing, and love your opinion about this. I feel like the neighbor fence is lower this year between departments than it has been in years past, where before there was huge walls between what marketing was doing in their ecosystem for what budget process required of them versus sales versus operations versus anything. And now it seems like the fence is a little least able to be talked over, if not broken down in some places, where sales realizes there is data that marketing can provide them to help, vice versa as well, and revenue management, that there's a more open understanding of each other's role value to what is being asked of their individual responsibilities as well. And I think that's
because the absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Well, when there's only one person sitting in all three chairs, it does help the process.
Right. You all of a sudden really respect what other departments did.
Right. Self-I says, what does marketing want to do today? I don't know. Shut up, sales.
Yeah, there's a reason they make movies and television shows like Band of Brothers, right? Once you've been in a trench with somebody while you're getting the hell bombed out of you, you tend to get much more tight with those folks, right?
Very true. Very true.
I think you're absolutely right, Lauren, in terms of that. I definitely don't see before the pandemic, one of my core things that I talked about with clients and, when given talks or things like that was definitely about the fact that silos suck and we need to, get rid of them. I haven't had I think that literally is the first time I've said that phrase in 2 years, right?
Because there aren't any right now.
There aren't any. Either there's not enough people for the silos to be there, or they've been through war together. And now, we're going to have reunions 20 years from now with these folks. Like, man, remember that? Here's the tontine.
Well, I mean, what I do find interesting as someone who, like you guys have been through a lot of the major, kind of pivot points of our industry is always at its best the few years after it gets punched in the face.
If Robert was here, we'd be able to go.
Well, no, I mean, and he'd also be able to talk about the Great Flood.
Yeah, maybe we go all the way back.
Jesus and Mary looking for rooms on Christmas Eve.
Overbooking.
The weird part was they didn't even know it was Christmas Eve yet.
Right. I mean, Robert did. He had that revenue management figured out.
And he had a program for it too, but there was no computer there at the time.
No, but I mean, like a lot of the things we normally talk about when we're, year number 7 after an event, is the stuff that develops the bad behaviors that develop,
right.
Because our industry, albeit probably doesn't feel lucky overall during the times that these things are happening. But in general, very few industries can you work in where, for periods of 10, 15 years straight, you literally could do anything or nothing and each year grow.
Mm-hmm.
And
with the huge caveat of depends by market, but yeah, for sure.
Right. As an average,
I completely agree. Sure.
And that actually breeds a lot of the challenges, that exist towards the long tail of those things, which is apathy towards trying anything different. Yeah, right. And so, but our industry is at its most interesting the few years after an event.
Right.
And I've always found that, really interesting about the space. And part of it is the natural progression of people's careers. It's like these things are so far apart that every time they happen, like most of the people working in the industry had never been through this before.
Right. That's right.
And
that is exactly right.
Sure. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
And even if you had lived through other things or been responsible or in a role during 2008 or as far back as 2001 or in Robert's case 0 BC, after the volcanoes erupted with the asteroid hitting, you learn it's still different.
I feel bad that we're dissing Robert. And he's not
it's totally fun that we could do this.
Robert's consultancy business really, really blew up after Pompeii. I mean,
well, he lost a branch office there, which is a hard thing to recover.
There also was a huge supply problem at that point. There just was not a lot of inventory in market.
Not a lot of inventory. And his software system was a failure in Bethlehem, I heard. But
yeah. So
I will say on a positive note, it has been fun going back to this idea that people are collaborating. It used to be historically when you're dealing with you're talking about rocks versus pebble versus sand. The rocks were repeatable business and sales. That's their first.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
What are we getting back next year for what reason and what have you? The general conversation was usually obscure of, okay, that company X, we have a relationship with whoever it is, which also has changed recently. And this is what they're looking to do. And it was pretty basic. There wasn't a lot of dialogue outside of the sales team as to anything about them. Right. Now, with marketing's collaboration in ways, I've witnessed this, and it's been really fun to watch where the questions are a little bit better. Like, okay, to your point earlier on about how corporate travel has diminished in comparison to historical numbers, whatever that number is, and that the transients filled some of the gap of it, was asking where the revenue team was actually better questions like, well, who's traveling? Asking the property. Okay.
That's right.
Who is traveling? Okay. It's not the salespeople from that company.
Right.
It's trainers from that company. Okay. So how does that affect the demand to us for the trainers compared to the salespeople coming to market, whatever? And they realized that this was the main training hub for that company. That's a lot different than whether or not it's a sales office for them or some operational. But that granularity of questions was, okay, great. How do we get to them differently? Or what other ways can we offer what is that they're interested in? What's their duration of length of stay changes? But the questions came from that, is what I'm trying to say, is that it was a much more granular understanding of it's just not, oh yeah, that's the company that sends us this and it's blank in general. It's more of exactly what is that type of business. And I think that has come from the fact that sales now feels comfortable asking that, or marketing asking them, what's the purpose and intent of these things? So
I would agree. The other thing that I think is really positive about this, and I'm seeing this, I'm going to make a rough estimate, 40% of the time, 50% of the time, it's not 100%. It would be great if it was, is I'm seeing things like revenue management, because they're better informed about that, being more patient on things like, oh no, we're empty. Our forecast, right? Our pace report looks really grim. We need to start like doing some rate promotions or things like that, as opposed to no, that business will fill, and it will fill just a little closer in. And so we need to like be a little more patient before we start pulling levers thinking we're going to do this, because you're going to get you're going to get the business anyway.
Right.
Depending on market, depending on yada, 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 et cetera. But, be patient before you start like slashing rate to try to drive demand, because all you're really doing is taking money out of your pocket that you were going to get anyway.
Right.
And I am seeing a healthy chunk of rev management teams being better informed, having better dialogue with the marketing teams, having better dialogue with the sales teams, and the properties yielding better as a result, because they're holding rate longer and finding that they're actually able to pocket more money.
And I think also in a positive to that is that more of a solidarity, that when ownership and or management is pushing for an unreasonable request, it's not a divide and conquer as it used to be. Like sales, you got to bring this number up, or or Mark,
it's not like it's that jackass.
It's like, yeah, shoot him.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But they're collectively giving an answer back, going, that is an unreasonable perspective, and or a reason of whatever they think it to be. And it's because collectively they're sharing that kind of information.
And listen, when you're having these conversations over making beds together, it also just changes the dynamic.
Nothing brings a team together like a good toilet plunge, I always say.
Yeah.
Oh golly! Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, but it is it's kind of in that conversation progression. August was obviously the month of aggregation of data and understanding what was on the table, and now this month is about how does it fit into the jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah,
right. But I think what we're really going to see from just the things I'm seeing is that October is going to be an interesting, lively discussion of what's reasonable expectation versus what planning has been done. And to keep it realistic, where it's just not a head nod to the ownership. Sure, 7%. Yeah, here it is. There's their number for you. And it's unrealistic, because then everybody just adopts it, going, well, that budget was crazy. Even now there's still conversations like,
well, But that's where I really strongly encourage folks. And I got very about this. But it's really about where you have to be having those discussions about scenario. You have to be having those discussions about stage gate. You have to be having those discussions about being more agile in terms of where you put things, because the reality is, if we're planning budget in August, and don't get me wrong, I definitely have clients. I definitely see people who are pulling their data together in August and things along those lines. Yes, we have to plan. I get we have to plan. I'm not saying we have to plan. I'm saying planning in August for what we think is going to happen in January and February and March, and next summer, with the current environment, you haven't been paying attention for the last 2 years. That's not the reality, right? So we need to be able to say, here's where we think we're going to be. Here's what's going to happen if we go over. Here's what's going to happen if we go under. And we've planned for those scenarios. But it's not, here's the budget. Let us all bow down before it, right? I'm going to come down with it etched into stone tablets. That world does not exist.
15.
I would argue it. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. one of the best lessons I ever got was a CEO who I used to work for, a brilliant guy. We went in, we ran this promotion, and it crushed, right? And I walked into his office, and we were showing the results, and we were doing a readout of like, this thing was amazing. We were, we did great. And he said, "Yeah, but why'd you miss?" I said, "What do you mean, why'd we miss? We're 20% over budget." He goes, "Yeah, you missed."
Yeah.
Right? It's okay that you missed. This is a good miss. But if you don't know why, you'll never be able to do it again.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
That's very true.
And so we need to be thinking about this in a different way to say, here's where the budget we think it's going to be. Here's a scenario we planned for. Here's a scenario we planned for. Not so that you can go, we didn't miss, but because we anticipated this and we have plans already in place for what we're going to do differently if we're not hitting. Right? And if we're not hitting over here, what's the cause of that? Is that something we're doing, or is that just there's demand in the marketplace and we're the fortunate beneficiary of it?
And most importantly, is it expected to repeat, or is it a one-time thing?
You got it.
Yep.
You got it. My all-time favorite story on this, and this is definitely just a weird story, was this is my Wyndham days. One day, our site traffic went nuts, went absolutely ballistic, and we had no idea why, right? And it took us 20, 30, 40 minutes. I mean, because we could see it. We were tracking this in real time and stuff like that. But we were like, what is going on? And then somebody walked into my office and said, "Hey, did you see Steve? The CEO was on the Today Show this morning." And we're like, "Oh, there you go." Right?
Well, I can share the same story.
We're not going to repeat that. We can try to get him on the Today Show again. But,
although that being said, if there's a quieter time of the year, let's try and have them do that then.
Yeah,
right. For sure, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, the point being, that's not something we're going to do every week.
No.
That's something we're going to do periodically, and
To this day, I still think I walked on water for about one day, where there was a resort in Jupiter Beach, Florida, and I had this campaign. I had just launched, paid campaign for it, and it just blew up. I mean, beyond any number that was even fathomable for us, and it was just this crazy amount of traffic. And I'm like, oh my God, I am so good at this. And no, Tiger Woods was buying a home on Jupiter Beach.
Yep. I've made the joke for years, Lauren, that from 2003 to 2007, I was the best digital marketer in the hospitality industry. It's clear everything I did worked.
Yeah,
Midas's touch. It was Tim's touch. It was it's true.
It was amazing how easy it was when every network you could go to for customers was growing at
it was
40%.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
In the budget process, I have to say too, in a positive, and also there's as you said, ship and shipwreck mentality is. It is a lot harder for departments to marginalize their expectations or sandbag, for lack of a better way of doing it, because of the data share that is now existing.
Yeah.
Okay, a salesperson can't just park something off to the side because it has to be somewhere, and that data is being used by other people now. So it's not something that. But I say that with the caveat on the reverse is the ability for good salespeople or good marketers to know where they could touch the one little gear with the one little hammer that makes the whole big machine change is much more a reality for people, because they realize that one leveraged contract for sales or that one leveraged marketing initiative can make a big difference that wasn't accounted for in the budget. And to your point, do you know what happens? I frustrated the heck out of the revenue team I was talking to. I said, what happened if we wiped out this segment completely, totally gone? What would you do? And they didn't have an answer. I said, well, that's, to your point, Tim, that's the kind of answers you need to have is what happens if, because there are some things happening in the market now that make me nervous as to like brands going into bed with third-party OTAs, things more so pushing more responsibility outward on some things, that it's creating these relationships that are leveraged that now you're relying more on them because you have no choice based on your relationship. Yeah. There is some volatilities that are being created by the way that the industry is shifting its collaborations.
Yeah, well, but I mean, they're shifting because at the moment it's beneficial to everybody to shift them. Wait, it's like the weather in Texas. Wait a little while, it will change, right?
Not in Florida, it just rains a lot.
Oh, don't get me started. I know it rains because it's inside my house every day.
I told you the Skylight Project should have been thought through a little bit more detail.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. For those who are watching the show and don't know the backstory, we had some flooding, and by some flooding, I mean my family room ceiling ended up on my family room floor.
I mean, to be fair, in Orlando, we actually just call that humidity. I know in other parts of the world they would consider that flooding. It's fairly common here.
Yeah, for sure.
There was a reason. There was a reason I had advice for you.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I want to go back to this because it's something else people should think about. I mean, we're seeing, I wrote a piece forever ago, and it's probably time to, pull it back off the shelf, dust it off, and update it. But it was, where would you get your business from if Google didn't exist?
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're entering a world, and I'm not saying Google's going away, but there's a whole group of customers who live their lives in completely different media channels that very few hotels are taking advantage of today. And in fairness, they're not taking advantage of them because nobody's figured out how to make them work yet, right? But I saw a stat the other day that something like I don't quote me on the number, but something like 20% of young adults and Gen Z folks, we're talking 21, 22 folks, something like 20% conduct their searches on TikTok, right? Which we always know there could be somebody who emerges, who disrupts the bigger guys. That is always a possibility. But we may be reaching a point where some of those disruptions start to be real. We actually have an approach, I've talked about it here on the show before, that we do all the time. And it goes back to scenario planning. It goes back to stage gating. And it's this idea of core and explore, right? Where you allocate a healthy chunk of your budget, 80%, 85%, 90%, to the things that have consistently worked for you and consistently work. And you make sure you leave some budget to test in areas that we don't know if it's going to work. Like that's got to be baked into the budget to say, I don't know if there's any real thing here for TikTok. I always laugh when people come to me and like, we need a TikTok strategy or we need an Instagram strategy or things like that. No, you don't. You need a strategy.
Yeah.
And part of the strategy might be test TikTok. Part of the strategy might be test Instagram. Part of the strategy
please understand that in testing, it includes learning what the user's expectation is.
For sure.
In that form of engagement.
1,000%.
And I can save all of you time. The answer is not they want a book now button.
Right.
Just saying. They don't want a book now button.
I'm going to be very candid. I have no opinion on what is the correct thing to do for TikTok. We're doing some tests with some clients of mine to see if we can learn what is the correct thing to do with TikTok. But today, I wouldn't even claim to have an answer because I haven't seen anybody who's doing it well yet in travel.
And the challenge with it is the ones who are most engaged with it are not at full economic viability for us yet.
And that is
so that
means
the case. You not only have to figure out what to do well, like you kind of have to hope that in doing it well, you see enough people who could be your customer having seen that and can track their behavior and response to it. So it doesn't mean stay away from it. Because quite honestly, I mean, there's nothing wrong with putting a bit of investment in winning the hearts and minds of people before they could be your customer. I mean, that's a fairly smart strategy.
The other reason I'm a fan of testing in this specific, testing generally, and TikTok is very specific, for instance, is there's this great book called Stage Not Age, right? Which really the whole point of it is, there are people who are 22 who are married. There are people who are 22 who have money and are traveling. There are people who are 22 and, are running a little startup and a little startup that might be a bigger startup later and are traveling to see customers and things along those lines. Yeah. There are people who are 22 who are sitting at home smoking weed and playing video games. I mean,
who could be building a startup?
Who could be? Yeah, I mean, it could be both of those at the same time, for sure, right? But the point being, it's what life stage are people in and where are they? So don't. It's not always safe to assume that these are kids, they're not going to book. Well, that's not 100% true.
I think I think the lesson of that
scenario.
is millennials, right? We all thought
Oh, for sure.
millennials were going to be this huge detractor from all the way things are done. And what we just didn't realize is they were just a little delayed in
right.
entering those phases of life. And all of a sudden, they enter the phases of life. And actually, I know you want to say something, but
No, it's okay. It's okay.
the prestigious Mr.
I
Butler.
can listen occasionally.
The prestigious Mr. Butler, interestingly enough, was telling me about an event where they had a Gen Z up there talking to destinations about all the like absolute stereotypical things that you just have to be as a Gen, like if you're trying to address Gen Z, but then at the same time contradicted herself. She was a Gen Zer and contradicted herself. One of the things she had said is Gen Z will not travel to areas that they don't agree with the politics. And then she mentioned she was moving to Texas.
Right. Exactly.
And fortunately, someone in that room was brave enough to actually like do the
more of a comment than a question.
and it actually ended up being she moved to Texas because that's where she got a job.
Right.
So, so if there's the right set of circumstances, it's
right.
not always this way because
Right.
we all know that's how all people work.
Right. Well, and that's very much the point I was going to make. I know a very specific luxury property that, you know, I want to be fair. This is not a management company property. This is not a flagged property. You know, there's an independent luxury property. They are not terribly large. You know, they've got 30 rooms, 35 rooms, or things along those lines. But they're seeing consistently a healthy percentage of the people who are staying with them every night. First of all, a real healthy percentage of folks staying with them every night are millennials. Right? Millennials have no money. Millennials are broke. Not all of them.
No. Well, and by the way, I'd like to point out
not a
lot
property
of
that has to sell
millennials.
200 rooms.
A lot of millennials are approaching, their 40s at this point.
Ed, I think you've heard me say this before. I know I've got a blog post about this. I actually try not to use the term millennials. 3 years ago, I was calling it adults approaching 40. I have now switched to referring to them simply as adults around 40. Right?
Yeah.
The oldest millennials are 40.
Right.
Prince William is a millennial.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Right? The heir to the throne is a millennial. But I was going to say this specific property, you know, they've got a healthy chunk of the folks in their property every night are millennials, and at least a few every night are Gen Z folks. You know, Now I don't know if they're doing it with their own money. I don't know if they're doing it with their parents' money.
It doesn't matter. They're doing it with money.
They're doing it with money. That is correct. You know, and I because it's a small property, I'm not comfortable saying that, you know, 10% of their revenue every night comes from Gen Z. But 10% of the revenue every night comes from Gen Z. You know, like I don't know that the percentages will scale if you're a 250-room property. But if you could sell a handful of rooms every single night to people who you can't sell to because they're not in the market, and maybe they should bathe more frequently. Sorry, I'm trying to do it in a van by the river.
I mean, to be fair, the van is a $150,000 conversion van.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And their income came from posting adventures from that.
But it gets back to that's why you got to test certain things, because maybe that's how you're going to connect with these folks and develop a loyal customer who's going to come back again and again and again for the next 30 years that they're traveling, or 40 years that they're traveling. Right.
Exactly.
So
we are at an hour.
Yes.
Strange as it may be.
That's crazy.
I know, right? It's just like
slipping into a warm bath. It was just very comfortable, luxurious, and lovely. I felt like I should have a mimosa and
some strawberries for various. Yes,
yeah,
we've hit our hour. I don't want to push past, getting you guys where we dilute the conversation. Only to say that I just absolutely, this is a wonderful birthday present. If anything to say, having you both on the show is wonderful. Hearing you guys talk is just always enjoyable, and we need to grab you more often to drag you into doing this so that people don't have to be listening to my happy, cheery, self-indulging perspective all the time. So
thank you for having me. Thank you. It's very nice that it's your birthday and I feel like I got a present. So.
Oh, thank you. for those that are, for some bizarre reason, not aware, like their head has been underneath of a rock for way too long, if they would like to find Mr. Tim Peter and all the gloriousness of it, I've noticed you're podcasting again more. I've seen some of those pop up again now.
We actually never stopped. We just we took a brief hiatus in July and August, and we do a revisiting series, which great content marketing lesson. In all sincerity, consistency matters more than anything. So even the weeks we were off, we were still posting episodes every single week. But new episode just came out this past week. And we have a whole run of new episodes coming. Whoops.
Very back.
Oh, Lauren had to go get the door. So, Tim, if they want to find that podcast,
well, they can find me and all the things I do at timpeter.com, or they can go to timpeter.com/podcasts, which is plural, if they want to go straight to the podcast itself. And Mr. St. Ange, if they want to learn all about the wonderful things you and your team at Flip2 do, how might they find you?
Well, you can find me on social media, Edward St. Ange, and you can come to flip.to to learn about what we're up to. I would definitely recommend checking out our blog. We have some wonderful stories of different examples of what people are doing interesting in marketing, not just with Flip2. And then Mr. Lauren Gray.
I got a birthday present at the door. That's why I had to go, because I got a delivery from for my birthday from Mr. Tim Welsh, actually, my cohorts in crime. So I got warned that there would be a delivery, and I'm like, oh, give me another minute.
It's technology. We know it's technology, so look forward to hearing what it is.
It's all good. But no, yes, and thank you for taking over while in my absence. But yes, social media-wise, well, I mean, from the ad. By the way, Tim, did you like that little video of you and the showing on TV that we put on LinkedIn?
I did. I feel really bad. I clearly need to give you an updated headshot, because
I was about to say I do
in
kind
that
of need
picture.
When I blew that up, it got a little grainy, and I apologize.
Well, no, it's not even that. It's that today my headshot is truly a head shot. The one you had is more of a hair shot.
I mean, you could have used the one I shared.
No. I thought about that.
Tim
the gift,
singing the national anthem.
Oh, yeah, there's that too. Yeah. I was thinking,
did you miss this, Tim?
I missed this.
As the national anthem was being sung, I actually put it in the group chat saying, like, Tim just killed the national anthem.
See, I still have held hostage the GIF that I made of Tim's reaction. Remember we did the animated GIF?
I have that as well.
I do too.
That's for special moments that we bring that out for the
Actually, Tim, you have probably a moment coming up that you can use that.
Yeah.
I've got to run, guys.
All right, guys.
Have a great
Thank
weekend.
you very much, Tim. Thank you so very much. Everybody, you know where we are, so you can find us on everything. Tim, it has been an absolute joy, and I hope you have a wonderful remainder of the week and all that kind of stuff. And then I'll catch up with you again very soon. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me, Lauren. See you soon.
Bye. And bye, everybody. Thank you for the privilege of your time. I haven't seen him in a while. It's great to have him pop back in. Always a pleasure to have both of you. Since we're on everything, let's be very quick about Dell. Since it's right up in vein of what we just talked about,